You don't take GDP very seriously.
I don't take it very seriously because I know a little bit about what goes into that sausage. I don't have much faith in those numbers.
Abhijit Banerjee, Nobel laureate, author, economist, and co-founder of JPAL, has spent decades studying poverty, inequality, and economic development across the world.
So we are sixth largest economy, and yet we have one of the world's most poorest population in the country. How both of the things are true at the same time?
We have a gigantic economy, but we have an even more gigantic population. So once you do the division, you get to where the real meat is.
So are we getting richer or poorer then?
The question is more who's getting richer. And there, some people are getting richer and richer and richer.
What do you call middle class? Give me some income range.
People who make over 35,000 a month, all the way up to people who make 2 lakhs a month.
Recently, China is trying to do in the world of AI and jobs. It's going to be illegal to replace and cut human beings. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think so. Some job can be done much better. You should let technology do that. But I think if it's only 5% better, it's not clear that the social cost is worth it.
Would you believe in the stats and data that we have that middle class salaries has been flat over 2-3 decades now? It's not increasing at all.
What that means is that
Why only rich are getting richer in India? You said that you would explain Indian economics with the help of a pressure cooker.
it has something to do with 2 things.
Before we start today's podcast, if you have found anything valuable from this channel, please subscribe. It's free, it takes less than a minute, but it means a lot to us. And to listen to the audio experience of this episode, please follow us on Spotify. जब भी कोई सामान ट्रांसपोर्ट करना होता है तो सामान के अकॉर्डिंग हर बार न्यू पार्टनर ढूंढना बहुत टाइम कंज्यूमिंग होता है. छोटी चीज़ भेजने के लिए कोई और, थोड़ा बड़ा लोड हो तो कोई और पूरा घर शिफ्ट करना हो तो बिल्कुल अलग वेंडर. इसीलिए आई यूज़ पोर्टर, क्योंकि पोर्टर हर लॉजिस्टिक्स नीड का सल्यूशन एक ही ऐप के थ्रू प्रोवाइड करता है. छोटा सामान हो तो पोर्टर 2 व्हीलर 20 kg तक का सामान ट्रांसपोर्ट करता है, और अगर बड़ा सामान हो तो पोर्टर के ट्रक्स 19 फीट तक 6000 kg तक का लोड ट्रांसपोर्ट करते हैं. और अगर पूरा घर शिफ्ट करना हो तो पैकर्स एंड मूवर्स सर्विसेज भी अवेलेबल हैं, चाहे सेम सिटी में शिफ्ट करना हो या एक सिटी से दूसरी सिटी में. पोर्टर इज अ ट्रस्टेड अफोर्डेबल ऐप आपकी सारी लॉजिस्टिक्स नीड के लिए. टू नो मोर अबाउट अवर टाइटल स्पॉन्सर पोर्टर एंड देयर सर्विसेज, चेक द लिंक इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन.
Why only rich are getting richer in India?
I think there's several pieces to that. As you will notice, there are certain global products which everybody wants, and call them iPhone, call them Prada, whatever, call them ChatGPT. But if you own those, and those products are all basically, the production cost is very little. Once you produce them, it's just the intellectual property. The Prada's Kolhapuri costs the same 600 rupees or whatever that any Kolhapuri costs. And then they sell it for 6,000 or whatever. So, it's
Probably 60,000.
60,000. I'm the last person who's going to buy a Kolhapuri from Prada, so it's not. I haven't bothered to find out the price. But in any case, so the point is that it's not the cost. Therefore, if you happen to have the intellectual property to the thing that people want, it's infinitely scalable. You can keep selling it to more people, and you don't run out of it because the cost of producing it is very, very little. So therefore, that's sort of the argument we make in our 2019 book, Good Economics for Hard Times. We make the argument that we are in a world of massive increasing returns. And so those people who happen to have the technologies where there is demand are going to become vastly rich. And the rest of the people, there is really very little that you can do to compete against that. So you are going to be, you can't really get there. In fact, now AI is doing something else, and it's been happening for a while. If there is this whole, even in India, the business press even recognizes that middle class salaries have not been rising. This has been written about by people in the business press.
Yeah.
Software salaries are flat, this and that. And that's because partly, the code writing is increasingly automated. Claude can write much better code than I can. So therefore, why would I do it? And that means that there's a lot of jobs that used to be well-paid jobs in India, which are kind of disappearing. And so if you look at the data on the income distribution, the rich in the income distribution the data that we collect totally leaves out the really rich. You can't get to their apartments because Darwan sends you away. So therefore, the only people rich in those are actually the middle class. And those people are actually losing ground, even in the national sample survey, relative to the poor, who are getting, who are doing construction jobs or this or that. There the wage is rising, not fast, but is rising somewhat. The wages of the software engineers is flat. And so, in fact, in the data, it looks like inequality is falling. Now, that's, to me, my guess would be that's false, because we really have no data on the rich.
Yeah.
And there is none. I mean, there used to be tax data. Many years ago, Thomas Piketty and I used the tax data to show that a big part of the gap between the kind of income from the National Sample Survey and income from the national product is the gap can be explained by the exclusion of the rich.
But are you saying that middle class is feeling poorer just because there are no good jobs left?
There are fewer and fewer good jobs, and that's true globally. I mean, it's not something that's easily fixed because of a lot of the Indian middle class were in the service industry, and so unless you are, there are jobs that are clearly going to actually, there'll be more demand for it. Like being a healthcare professional is going to still be good because I think AI will help with healthcare, but I think eventually if we have an aging population increasingly and demand for healthcare will go up. So I do think that healthcare will be fine. Teaching will be fine, I think. Though eventually I think some of the lecture will be replaced by, but I still think that, there'll be a lot of complementary activity, explaining the lecture and all that, even if it's an online lecture. But I think other jobs, like, for example, being an accountant, AI is so much better at accounting than anybody, and it's just, or being a low-level animator or any of these kinds of jobs, which are kind of reasonably high-skilled jobs. It's not that they are, you have to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
But it's just AI is so much better at those things. So I'm pessimistic about that class of jobs being, so people need to move out and into maybe podcasting, some creative sector maybe.
But what do you call middle class? Give me some income range. In India.
Yeah. So I would say people who make maybe over 35,000 a month, all the way up to people who make 1.5, 2 lakhs a month, even more actually. Maybe these days
3 lakhs.
3 lakhs. Yeah, that's that range.
Okay, so 30,000 to 3 lakh, you would call it middle class?
Yeah, 30,000 is really the bottom.
And specifically, if you talk about tech jobs, it's like 18,000 or maybe lesser than that.
Yeah. So it's 30,000 is a reasonable benchmark for a middle class job, and then maybe the top end of that is 3 lakhs or something. Yeah.
And would you believe in the stats and data that we have that middle class salaries, which is 30,000 to 3 lakh, has been flat over 2-3 decades now. It's not increasing at all.
What that means is that in inflation adjusted, the salaries are actually fallen. For many of these groups, their inflation has been not huge, but still over 10 years, there's been substantial inflation. So,
but why do you think this is happening? Because the top talent CEO salaries has been increasing and it's gone over the roof, but the middle class salaries have stayed flat and probably fallen if you adjust it with inflation.
A lot of these jobs were, at some point, these were jobs that there was no substitute for. And increasingly, technology is substituting for those jobs. So it's a relatively simple point.
But shouldn't in the companies where people are making a lot of money, or probably these companies which are global products, they are profiting a lot and making a lot of money, the salaries should rise there?
There's an interesting use of the word "should" there. So I would agree with you, but it's a very specific moral view of the company. The company takes the view that if I can replace this guy and get AI to do it for less, I'm going to do it. And the problem with the market is that it has its own logic, and unless you actually actively resist it, and there is, let me say that it's not true that the whole world works the same way. In Germany or in Denmark, the highest and lowest salaries the band is relatively small within a company, or in Sweden or even in France, though it's a little bit higher, but not the entrepreneurs, but the CEO is often paid maybe 10 times what the lowest employee is paid. In India, you can make that division, and in the US as well. So there is some labor markets are much more normed, much more, there is a expectation that you don't cross a certain ratio. And the US used to have that till the 70s. And since then, the ratio of the CEO, you think of Elon Musk getting paid $54 billion. Okay. I'm not making that number up. And so $54 billion. So a billion is a million times 1,000. So 54,000 is, if somebody gets paid 50, which is a very good salary for a low-skilled employee. Probably they don't get it. They probably get 27, not 54. That's a million times more. I'm just giving you some, a kind of a benchmark example. But the fact that that's considered acceptable socially, that's a problem to me. That's respecting the market way too much to say that, if I can get it, why shouldn't I? Is a level of cynicism which eventually undermines the social equilibrium.
You saw what recently China is trying to do in the world of AI and jobs. They are saying that it's going to be illegal to replace and cut human beings because of AI jobs. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think so. The Chinese...
It should be illegal to cut people off because AI can be more effective than humans?
The question is, what would the human do? In the end, one thing to realize is that when somebody gets fired in a state, maybe in India we don't do much for them, but if you take a state which is more welfareist, China is more welfareist than we are. They are more conscious of unemployment being a social problem. It becomes state's liability. The state pays for those people to somehow to survive, to transition to another job. It's not free. It's money that comes out of somewhere that's paying for those people. And so I think there is a legitimate ground to say that if I can increase my profit by 5% by firing somebody, but I ruin somebody's life, then there is some value attached to that choice that should be taken into account, that there's some social concern that is reflected in the fact that this is somebody who will have who has children who go to school, who have hard time, rather suddenly, even if he can get a job somewhere else, to move and to cut his standard of living and to sell his car and, move out of his apartment. All of these things are extremely costly and emotionally costly, but also economically costly. He have to take his children out of the good school they go to and put them into a corporation school. I mean, all of those choices have social costs. And so the idea that this is just the market's logic, which you seem to be implying, seems to be missing the fact that there's no justice in the market. It's just somebody got lucky and got a better technology, and therefore I'm screwed. And there's costs being imposed on people. So I don't know. You can obviously have a different view. I mean, Elon Musk surely has a different view, but I'm not going to take that view.
But do you think then you should continue working with employees who are ineffective and inefficient with the growing technologies of the world?
The question is, what does that sentence mean? So inefficient, yes, maybe if some job can be done much better, you should let technology do that. But I think if it's only 5% better, it's not clear that the social cost is worth it. And second, I think society has an obligation to think about, well, then what will this person do? I think one day we're going to face this problem in droves. There'll be people extremely angry because they have nothing to do. If you think of what happened in the US, why there is so much support for Trump, it's because there are places where people had jobs, they had stable living, and then Chinese imports came in and took those jobs away. And they were 53 or 57 or 46, and it's very hard at that age to move because you're not fresh out of of college or something, and you have your social network, you have your friends, you have your daughter goes to school, you are the coach of the local baseball team. I mean, whatever, this is kind of person, and they suddenly realize their life is no longer viable. They have to move somewhere and live with their 80-year-old parents because they don't have a living. And so they're extremely angry. One thing that you see in the US is reason why I think Trump is popular with a certain group is because he articulates that anger. There's a huge amount of anger. So I think eventually you can treat people like they're, machines, but machines don't get angry. And I think we need to take that into account.
India is 6th largest economy in the world. Actually, we've fallen down to 6th now.
It's a bit about. These are very fragile things because the rupee goes down because there's a war in the Gulf. Are we suddenly much poorer or not? It depends very much on too many factors that have no real meaning. So.
True. But so we are 6th in the world, 6th largest economy, and yet we have one of the world's most poorest population in the country. How both of the things are true at the same time?
So one thing to say is I find this rather, I think there are reasons to maybe sometimes talk about the size of the economy, especially if we are talking about, what happens to the global economy if India suddenly slows down, then the size of India matters. But for poverty, what matters is per capita income. And we're still very poor in per capita income. Because it's not, we have a gigantic economy, but we have an even more gigantic population. So once you do the division, you get to where the real meat is.
But so are we getting richer or poorer then?
We've been getting richer. I don't think that, I think the question is more what you asked right at the beginning, which is who's getting richer? And there, some people are getting richer and richer and richer. I go sometimes to a restaurant, expensive restaurant in India, and it's like, you can't get in. There's so many people who can spend, 5,000 rupees per head without a thought. And then there are people who can't spend 5,000 rupees in a month. But it's not that you see you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But what do you think is the biggest thing then, which economists, politicians, or all the experts are probably fundamentally getting wrong about India's poor?
I don't think they're getting it wrong. I mean, I think there are kind of very politically motivated kind of people claiming there is no poverty in India. But I think I spend a fair amount of time traveling in rural India, so I have a relatively first-hand view of this. I would say that's I was in December. I was in northern Maharashtra in the tribal belt, and see what the houses are like. I mean, I'm not saying that things haven't improved. Things have improved. But if you look in Mumbai, the jhoparpattis are still there. Right? You come into Andheri and suddenly there is this set of completely falling down little. I mean, I think we are a little bit. I mean, other than people who have very specific political motivations, it's hard to imagine anyone not recognizing that there's a fair amount of poverty left in India. That's not to say that things haven't improved. Things have improved vastly since. In my lifetime, vastly. The poverty I saw when. I was as a teenager. I spent a fair amount of time in villages, and in Jharkhand or something. And there, the poverty was nobody had a. There were people wore one dhoti and maybe had a gamcha to put around their shoulders, but that was it. But there was a dire poverty.
What has changed about poverty and the rich-poor gap?
I think the rich-poor gap has the rich have got richer relative to the poor. But the government has also, the fraction of income that the government gets has gone up. GST has increased the government share. Now, a lot of that money is coming from middle-class people who are spending. It's not that they're coming from the rich. I mean, GST is a very, it's kind of, everybody pays GST. It's not that, Ambani pays the same GST as the poorest person, more or less. There's some brackets and this and that, but yeah. So therefore, it's not, but still, that money means that for the poorest people, the government is able to redistribute, and there is more redistribution now than there was before, and the Narega wages are higher, and the jobs in construction. Now I've been actually a couple of not last summer, but the summer before that, I spent a lot of time interviewing construction workers in Delhi and Hyderabad, and they were getting paid, depending on your skill level, 500 a day or 350 a day, but not 50 a day. So I mean, there is clearly, and if you paid 50 a day, you wouldn't get anybody. They would stay in the village and get Narega. So there is an effect of, if you can make some reasonable amount of money in the village, why would you move to the city unless you're paid substantially more? So I think there is a push pressure from the bottom, and that has meant that the earning, nobody's making the kind of salaries that people were making even 20 years ago.
So that has changed. Like people are making, at the bottom, people are making more money.
Yeah. And I think that's a result of policy. I think the fact that now, for example, if you live in a village and you are classified in the bottom 75% of the economy, you get PDS, you get food subsidies. And so, survival is possible if you live in your village and you have a ration card. You can live off that. I mean, it's not that it's not wonderful. I don't want to glamorize poverty in any way. I find it reprehensible, but I still think that things are better now.
So coming back to your professor mode a little bit, okay, which is because we started that way and you said you can teach with basic terms as well.
Yeah.
So first, teach me on, let's say, a whiteboard or like a white paper, if I have to just put it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
What is RCT? Like what is this thing? How would you explain it to me if I don't know anything about it? Why did you win Nobel for it?
Okay. So imagine that you want to know whether, having computers in school is, these are different schools. And in these schools, there are, some of these have computers, some of these don't. And let's say these are the ones that have computers and these other ones don't.
Okay.
What would your guess be about the performance of the children in these schools versus these schools?
They'll perform better because they have computers?
Or because they are in schools that can afford computers. Their parents are richer. Their parents can hire tutors. Their parents have access to, online classes and they can. So everything is correlated here. Mm-hmm. So what our RCT does is it says, if I want to study the effect of computers on children's learning, first thing I need to do is I need to compare like with like. I can't compare the schools, the Ambani school with the Bombay Municipal Corporation schools for a million reasons, not just because they have computers. So therefore, what I should do is I should do an experiment where I randomly choose schools. So maybe I'll choose this one, and then I'll randomly choose this one, and I'll give them computers, and I'll leave the rest without the computer. And then then these are comparable because I chose them without I blinded myself and picked them out of a hat. So there's no systematic bias. So then I can compare them and say that, well, is it really true that learning is higher in the schools that have computers than the ones that don't?
Yeah.
So that's the extremely basic idea. Then, of course, there's a lot of technique and statistical nuance that you have to deal with. But if you want to, so the basic idea is exactly this idea that if you just compare naively, you get biased outcomes. You say that the children in a Ambani school are, they learn better because they have computers. But in fact, that it's not true. So this is what we are guarding against.
And what could be one statistical nuance? So
for example, suppose I chose these 4 schools to have computers. Okay? But only 3 of them actually got the computers. The computer delivery to this one failed. What do I do in that situation? Does the experiment have to fail? Or is there a way to deal with that nuance? And the answer is, if I say that I'm going to compare the schools that were originally assigned to have computers with the schools that were assigned not to have computers, that's still a valid comparison. I know that's not all of them got it, but I can scale by that. So that's a statistical nuance, if you like.
Got it. Good. And what, if you have to explain me in this way, what would be economics for you? How would you explain economics?
Economics takes very seriously the idea that you have to understand people's motivations in interpreting the effect of anything. So if I want to look at what happens in a particular situation, then I can either say people have, they are from this caste and therefore they behave in this way. Or I can say that, but the world is always changing and they're also looking at other opportunities. And therefore I need to understand how people's behavior interacts with the market situation or the institutional situation. And economics takes that second step very seriously, that individual choice and collective outcomes are related not in a mechanical way. They're not just because, I am from a particular caste, I won't do a certain behavior. I'll do what I do also depends on, what government programs are available, what kinds of schools are available, what is the macroeconomic situation, can I borrow easily or not? All of these things matter. So economists take the fact that people are inside this complex of, related but distinct institutional movements and make active choices. They take that very seriously. So I would say that's what makes economics a very distinct way of thinking about anything. So when I think about the computer in the school, to go back to that example, I naturally ask, why is it that these schools have computers and those schools don't? And then I have a theory of that, which makes me suspicious of comparing them. Why am I suspicious? I'm suspicious because I know that these schools probably don't have a computer just randomly. They probably have a computer because their parents are rich, or the government is particularly focusing on these schools, or there's some particular
privilege is there.
So that asking that question is what makes me an economist. That I'm very much interested in the underlying causal mechanisms that cause these differences, and that allows me to then think of what's the right experiment.
Interesting. And then you said on the briefing call that you would explain Indian economics with the help of a pressure cooker.
Pressure cooker is a good example of something it's a technology we use a lot more in India than in most of the world. It's and Indians have adopted this technology, even though it's actually a very interesting technology. Is the fact that pressure raises the boiling point and therefore it allows things to cook much faster is an idea that has been around for a while. But still, if you look in a regular US household, they wouldn't have a pressure cooker till 20 years ago when in some sense the Instapot, which is actually a pressure cooker, was introduced. But even then, that wasn't, Instapot went out of business actually. It's not vastly popular.
Yeah.
And it has something to do with two things. One is our lifestyle, that we make slow-cooked, what were traditionally slow-cooked, like dal, and, we need to melt things, which is relatively unusual in the US or in Germany or something. The second thing is that we are poor, and we are especially we are an energy poor country. We are always conscious of the fact that energy prices, we are very sensitive to global energy prices. So we are always going to be, worrying about, can I afford to cook this dal, but this chana will take a long time to boil. So should I do it? And what a pressure cooker does is it makes that much more energy efficient. So it goes the pressure cooker is a very good example of where preferences and the market interact to define a particular style of cooking, which is very Indian. In Indian, you read a recipe, they'll always say, you put it in the pressure cooker, you wait till three whistles, and then you're done.
Yeah.
You try finding that in a Chinese recipe or a Spanish recipe. It just doesn't exist. So it is very much that the fact that that's there is a very interesting interaction of energy prices, poverty, and taste.
Yeah. But so pressure cooker became popular just because of energy efficiency in the country.
We used to have something called economic cooker before the pressure cooker,
Okay.
which was I'm actually not old enough to have used one or seen one. But I think there was a prior thing where they would at least cook, and I've seen that as a child. I saw that when you cook rice, you put in a little dabba inside the rice, you put some sabzi, so that when the rice cooks, the same heat cooks the sabzi. And so that idea is, I think the economic cooker basically was a way of using that structure. So there's all this thinking about how to economize on energy. And this has been a while. I mean, I'm saying last 100 years, economic cooker goes back to the 1930s or something. So I think these things were, economic comes from economic, by the way. It's exactly this idea that it was an economic way to cook.
And what these things has to do with economics?
So one of the
Samosa, laddu, chips,
and mithai. So one idea that I think is very prevalent, even in our policy conversations in India, I mostly say unfortunately, is being judgmental about the poor. And you hear this a lot. You say that, she has no money, but she's always eating samosas or something, or having chai. And I always thought that's backwards. That in some sense, because we have such fulfilling lives, we are able to, it's much easier to resist temptations when you have fulfilled lives. It's easy to be disciplined when I know that I'm getting lots of rewards. When you think your life is a bit dreary, you clean people's dishes, some pleasure there has to be some space for pleasure. Otherwise, life isn't worth living. And so I think fundamentally these chips, why are chips popular? Chips popular because, they're very easy to transport. They're available. If you go to a village in rural Udaipur district, okay, which is, once you get out of Udaipur and you go 50 kilometers, you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I spend lots of time in those places. And in those villages, you'll get Parle-G and you'll get a bag of chips. These are durable. So they're things that are easy to, they provide a certain amount of quick satisfaction. They're cheap to transport. So cheap, therefore they stay cheap. If you try to provide, this barfi there, that would be much more expensive. But barfis don't travel well. So there's a logic to why these things are available, which is for poor people, they want something a little bit different. They eat, whatever, makai ke roti and some sabzi, and it gets tedious. And especially children, I think it's the children often say, this is I had that every day. So mother then says, or father then says, chalo, I'll get you a bag of chips. I think those are very important for survival. So, if you don't, and in that sense, I am very much against being judgmental about what poor people do. I think they have a hard enough life without us criticizing them.
True. So they usually consume more chips and more samosas because of indulgent pleasure?
I think not more, because of course we can afford anything, but for them it's very much more important.
And it's like a short escape for them?
Yes.
And what's with laddu and mithai?
Well, the same. Laddu and mithai, I'm just saying.
But it's much more expensive.
It's much more expensive, so it's much bigger treat. They might actually give it to the god. Say, you'll buy one mithai and you give it to the god, and then you share it among your family. Then you have done some, so you got some punya and you also got some mithai.
And what if you wrote something about this somewhere?
It's a good one. It's a nice one.
Why is guava so pyara?
Exactly.
What is in guava?
So guava, turns out, has is a very good source of bioaccessible iron. So the problem with iron is partly that many things have iron, but they're not very bioaccessible. Meaning they don't, even if your body gets it, it expels it, basically. So you don't actually absorb the iron. The advantage of guava is it's a very good source of bioaccessible iron. And we have a huge anemia problem. We are like, with a few other countries, we are kind of where the anemia in the world is concentrated. And so it was more that it was a example of some very simple thing we can do to help with this anemia issue. That there is not a matter of
how anemia issue and guava and economics it's related.
Well, anemia is a huge productivity issue. There's evidence showing that, anemic people are 20% less productive. Okay, so big gains from anemia, solving anemia. So that's one part of the economics. Productivity is like, if you read the business press, it's like number one issue. No? So there's nothing so surprising about. And the second thing is, I think that's where it goes back to what I said before about understanding behavior. So what's nice about guava is it's available everywhere. It's really like one of these things that grows in most villages. You don't have to, and it's tasty. And so people are willing to eat it without really, you don't have to, it's not that this special sag that you have to eat or this laddu that has made with this and that and the other. It's much more difficult to implement when it's something that people intrinsically don't. But if you tell people that, eat more guavas, this is still easy. And I think that's the connection with what I was saying with the economics, which is understanding how do we deal with that people have certain behavioral patterns, and they will, if you give them a very difficult challenge, you have to go to the city and buy this thing and regularly eat it. Some will do it, but a lot won't. But if you say कि गांव में प्यारा मिलता है, आप हर रोज एक खा लेना, perhaps a lot more people will do it.
True. And why will earnings will go 15% up?
Because anemia just undermines work. Anemia, your body doesn't absorb oxygen, so you get tired. It's very simple. Iron is, hemoglobin is related to iron, and if the body don't have enough iron, you get tired faster. There's lots of studies of that.
Got it. And what is the S-trap curve of a poverty curve?
So,
nice.
So, think about somebody, who has extremely low income. When you have extremely low income, you're tired all the time. We talked about anemia, but even just not having enough calories means you're tired. or I give you maybe an example, I believe more. Suppose you want to start a business, but a business where you have a shop, maybe you can have a shop. If you go to slums all over in India, you see that there are lots of shops. People basically take part of their front room and put a wall and put a shelf, and then they put some stuff on it, and so you are little kirana shop. Typical, absolutely. But maybe you can do all that without a lot of capital. But if you don't have any capital, you can't put anything on the shelves. And then nobody's going to come to your shop. It's a waste of time. So that means that the productivity of your investment actually goes up very fast as you get more and more investment. Okay? So what the idea of the S shape is that when you're very poor, going from being able to stock 2 packets of biscuits to 6 packets of biscuits is still pointless. Nobody's come to your shop for the 6 packets of biscuits. But if you go to biscuits plus some other chips per mixture plus other toothbrush plus toothpaste plus shampoo, then people will come. So the return to capital is steeply increasing for a while. You have more capital, you can just, you have a shop, but your shop is worthless till you have enough. So that's the idea of an S shape, is that for a while, at the if you think of the left tail of the S, a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more doesn't do much. So,
you give a lot.
You have to get a substantial amount before the business really flourishes. Because till then, it's, nobody's going to come to your shop to see if you have the 4th packet of biscuit. But they will come if you have many things and, it's attractive. And when I get there, I'm going to think of what I'm going to buy, but it's a nice, attractive shop. So it's very much this idea that as we get further up the S kind of goes up steeply for a while. And so that's, if you make more investments, you get, for a while, the returns. And of course, then at some point, if you have a small store, there's no point investing more. Yeah. So then it becomes the top of the S where it kind of flattens off.
So you're saying that if you have to get someone out of poverty, giving them small amount of money probably every quarter or every year is not going to make significant difference. Giving them one shot lump sum money is going to make the difference.
Yeah, I did an experiment in Kenya where people got either, I guess monthly small amount of money, or they got all of that at the beginning. So then both of this continued for so I'll actually say it in 2 steps. So this continued so the monthly small amounts of money continued for 2 years. The lump sum that they got was equivalent to that 2-year amount.
Okay. What was it? Like, what was the monthly?
I think it was, so 83 cents a day but at Kenyan real exchange rate. So the amount, it's
what
small.
Would be like a monthly in dollar terms?
Would it be? It would be something like maybe $8-9 a month. A month.
Okay. So like 800 rupees.
Yeah.
Somewhere around that.
A month.
Into 24.
Or the equivalent in
one lump sum.
One lump sum. And you see that the lump sum generates many, many, many more businesses than so this is a randomized control trial. Some villages got this, small amount. Some people. What's more remarkable is that some people were given a promise that they will get that small amount for 12 years. And the lump sum was only for the value of 2 years. And it still generated more businesses than the 12-year amount.
Why?
Because people, exactly what you say, what will people, you give them small amounts, they'll never be able to, either they're very disciplined and they save up and save up and save up, or there's no way to turn it into a business. So they buy whatever, they repair, they spend it in whatever way that makes sense for them, but assuming that it's very hard for them to build a business. Whereas you give them a lump sum, they know that this money will go. If they don't turn it into a business, they turn it into a business.
But then, has it ever happened that if you give lump sum money to somebody for no reason, just for free, they end up misusing it?
Sure, some people will, but I think the most striking fact is that you don't really see. There's lots of studies of this, of people getting lump sums or getting free money of some kind, and there's no evidence that it generates more laziness or more drinking and all the things that people imply. There's evidence on all of them, and none of them happen.
But you've junked this theory, right?
I've junked it for years, and the evidence keep mounting that it's not true.
Explain me, if somebody is hearing this for the first time, why do you think or believe that giving free money to people or giving freebies to a lot of poor people is not making them lazy? It's actually good for them.
Yes, it's good for them. In fact,
it's not ruining them.
Yes, there is a study before USAID was shut down. They did a meta-analysis, which is like when you combine 140 different studies and looked at the effect of that on work. And they found that people who get freebies, let's use the popular word, work slightly more. Not much more, but slightly more, not less. The important thing is that they don't work less, they work more. And that's what we found also. When you give people, in all of these studies, there was no evidence, that they work less.
Why?
Why? Because I think we misunderstand what motivates work. I think being depressed and thinking that your life is basically, it sucks, is not a way to get people enthusiastic about working. When you give them an opportunity, they say that, look, you can do, now you can have a better life maybe. They are more enthusiastic about trying things. I think we just don't understand.
But do they not get used to that, hey, because I'm getting things for free, I should just be this?
I'll give you an example. In West Bengal, we did a study now 19 years ago. There were women who were extremely poor. So poor that the poor people in the villages, we asked them, who's poor in your village? And they would say, those people are poor. So we did a mapping and we found they identified the poor. So these were people who, the very poor people who live in West Bengal villages, all thought were poor. They were given an asset, usually, some got cows, some got goats, some got some trinket to sell in the local villages. They could choose. They chose whatever they wanted. And then they were given some hand-holding. Somebody from the organization came and said, yes, you can do it. And that went on for a year. We now look at them 17 years later. We have data for them 17 years after. So we've been following them. 17 years after, the people who got that asset are 40% richer. They're still richer. It's not that this asset was given to them once. Remember, that's why it connects to your question. They were given the asset in 2007. Okay, 2024. And we see that they are 40% richer, their consumption is higher, their income is higher, their children are doing other things, their lives are transformed. It's more that I think people underestimate how hard it is it's not that everybody does that. Of course, some people, whatever their mental illness. I mean, there are lots of reasons why not everybody will do it.
Yeah, they'll get drinking problems, they'll get some stuff, but that's going to be very small.
But on average, the effects are dramatically positive. I mean,
Why do you think is that? Like, why do you think? Actually, there are two questions to this.
Okay.
One is, why do you think people who have been given free cows or free business opportunity or free money to start something, why are they more motivated and eventually in 10, 12, 15 years they do better rather than just getting addicted to the free money or free stuff and misusing it? That's the first question. And then second is, if there is enough evidence that people who have been given freebies, they do better, why do a large section of society believes that they'll get addicted to free money and be lazy and then giving money is not good?
The first part I'm going to answer quite specifically.
Okay.
And the second one, I'm going to say something and then speculate a little.
Okay.
So the first part is, I would say, for a lot of people, it goes back to that S-shaped curve we discussed. It's the fact that, it's not that they were sitting there waiting for, okay, I get some free money, I'm going to go on vacation. They were hoping that they get a chance in life. A lot of people want to do things in their life. And, you are someone who's done something in your life. You know that you didn't come just from this sense that, okay, this is programmed into me. It was a choice. You wanted to do something. And I think, why would we think poor people are any different from us? So if you give them an opportunity to give a better future for their children, better future for themselves, to live in a house that's, nice house, why would they just say that, no, I should just go drink? I mean, just this, why would that be the psychological model that we believe in? That's my answer to the first part of the first question. Second question, so there is actually now fair amount of policy traction. So in Bihar, the GVK, which is part of the labor ministry, but it's maybe a semi-governmental organization which implements social programs.
Okay.
They implemented this program I described to you, which is the one of giving cows, etc., which is called the graduation program, bizarrely enough. But that program, they implemented, I think, for 1 lakh families. And with part of that sample, we did a randomized control trial. And it's vastly successful, dramatically successful also. So my view is that, there is now some policy traction. When you look at how difficult it is to keep going back to people and trying to support them, I think people understand that that's part of the answer. The last question is why? Because I think people partly people need to feel that, their success is fully earned. And so these poor people, they didn't earn it. I earned it. In fact, we don't recognize that a huge part of our success is always luck. We were born into the right kind of family. I was born into a family of professors. My grandfather was a school teacher. My great-grandfather was a school teacher. We had books all over the house. So the fact that I can read and write and understand things is not an accident of, my genius. It was just, luck. It was luck. I was born in the right place. I was, my parents encouraged me they discussed ideas with me. My father would give me math puzzles and we would discuss them. I mean, it was all of this cultural capital is luck.
Yeah.
And I don't think of myself as being a genius. I think of myself as being someone who was in the right place at the right time. And I benefited from it. I think people underestimate how much how difficult it is for the poor to get out of where they are. It's just how much pressure is on them. And they, in reverse, they give themselves too much credit.
And why do you think rich people, they don't do much charity? They don't actually give freebies. A lot of people don't. And I asked this question specifically to Bill Gates as well. And I asked him that when you go ask for money or probably just spend time with people with a lot of money, why there are just few tech billionaires who are ready to give away their entire wealth versus the conglomerate who's accumulated wealth over years and years and years of money, and they are not able to give money so easily. What's the reason?
I think sadly, I think a lot of ways I have it. Why will I? I mean, I find it deeply disturbing. And this is not everybody, obviously. There are people who actually genuinely are committed to the poor, and Bill Gates is an excellent example. He takes, I think, what is particularly, I think, laudable about his example is that he not only gave his money, he gave his attention. And that's a very valuable thing. He's a very, very thoughtful man, and he gave his intellectual investment to this project. So, and I fully credit him for that. So I think it's also that partly people don't get. So I think what gets understood is that it's also exciting to do these things, to solve problems. And I think a lot of people haven't also got that taste. So a lot of it is also about, feeling that this is also a remarkable project. It's not, and I think that here when they do charity, it's also that people haven't yet got this idea that, I'm going to actually, this is going to give meaning to my life. And I think there are people, of course, who do that, who are really...
But more rich people give less money. But there are few who give a lot.
Because I think they also feel that, it's not exciting for them, and why will I? And there's all this nonsense about this is going to just be bad for the poor. I really think this conversation is important because I hope people really look at the data. I've been looking at the data, and I don't think I'm a pushover. I think part of the reason why I'm successful is that I'm known for being quite careful about these things. So, and I would say I'm not, and I know that the evidence is very clear that this is not going to, ruin the lives of the poor. So they tell themselves these stories also. That's why the stories are damaging.
Why do then people also say, because if there's data that freebies are actually helping, that the freebie politics in India is ruining the country?
So there is a question which is slightly distinct there. So I think part of it is what we discussed, which is that people don't like the idea that, their tax money is being given to this issue you read all the time, I must say, and depresses me.
But do you think that freebie economy or freebie politics is ruining country?
I don't. But I still think, I actually, it's interesting that all parties do it. And I don't think it's ruining the country. But I do.
And they keep topping it up.
To keep talking about, but remember, the country is also getting richer. It's not that the share of GDP going to the poor is dramatically exploding. So as the country gets richer, there's more GST, as we discussed, and there's more money
for welfare.
For welfare. So I don't see a reason why this is such a awful thing. But nonetheless, I do think that the one worry which is real and maybe is that there's a little bit of chasing visibility there. So, in Tamil Nadu, it was famous that, before the elections, the chief minister would summon people and tell them, this time TVs for everybody or computers for everybody. So there is a little bit of that. It's not clear that everybody needs a TV or needs a computer. So I do think that there is some amount of, visibility chasing, which makes it sometimes wasteful. So I think there is some reason to try to be very disciplined about these things and say that, here's what the evidence says, and we should really invest this money thinking about the long term rather than here is a pre-election scheme which happens to be computers for every school, but it may be that that's not what they need. I do think that there is some validity to the concerns.
So do you feel this competitive welfareism for popularity in winning votes, is it good or bad?
I would say that overall it's meant that more money is going to the poor, so it's good. I mean, I think, as I said, there are better ways to do it. And I'm happy that Bihar went through this, and they really went through the research. We discussed the research with them. So they were very mindful of the fact that money, eventually, if you want to do it for all the poor, money is scarce.
And what would be a better model to give? The way government is in like few specific states, they're giving it to women 1,000 rupees a month or 3,000 rupees a month, 2,000 rupees a month. What do you think is a better way, that giving them 1,000 rupees a month for next 5 years, or giving them upfront, like 70,000 upfront?
So women's labor market opportunities are often very constrained. So will their family let them start a business? I remember a lot of the women we worked with in that graduation program were actually either abandoned women or widows or husbands who had a stroke and were not going to do anything. And so they were actually working. And whereas a lot of this issue about labor force participation. And so I don't know whether women will be allowed, this whole story that I told is about women being able to work. And so that's the reason why it may be different for women
in India.
And
doesn't it become a big, let's say, hole or pocket or like big burden on a state's capital or like budget, right? Isn't that a problem? Because then is that not harming state because they're spending literally lakhs and crores of rupees?
Another way to think about it is that the fact that there is social peace, and that India is a relatively stable country, and that there's not a lot of violence and all that, has something to do with the fact that the inequalities that are as glaring as they are, you started with the inequalities, so I know you're aware of it, are not allowed to explode totally. That in some sense, the poor are not allowed to go to zero. So, I think there is something there about maintaining social coherence that's critical in any society. So I don't even think that I think the rich should understand that, the access to a stable, large economy is partly funded by these social programs.
You have publicly said that tax havens should go.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Should go, meaning every country should want them gone. I mean, why would you want tax havens? It's a bit like, it's undermining your own project of taxing people. And then, there's a little bit of cynicism sometimes in the sense that governments often want to, pretend that they are very serious and then not do it because the rich are very powerful. But beyond, I see no reason to have any sympathy for tax havens.
But why do governments don't ban tax havens? Which one would be the most lucrative tax haven in the world?
Probably less. I think both Switzerland and Monaco are probably, but they're less and less good tax havens.
They're not tax great tax havens.
They're-
Like St. Lucia and all of that would
No,
be
they're
like
great tax havens, but they are a little bit less. People are. What Monaco does is it's like, you become a resident, there are no taxes. It's much more like legit. Now, if you move to St. Lucia or Granada, it's a little bit dodgier. So,
It's shady.
It's shady. So there is some trade-off there. But I think both Monaco and Switzerland are moving towards a more they're more complying better. So I think that this is changing, and I think it should change totally.
But why, let's say, why country like India doesn't ban these tax havens?
The question is, what does the ban mean? So we are also, Mauritius and Dubai are big investors in India. So Indians take residency in Dubai. And so what does it mean? You can't invest in India if you're a resident of Dubai. Dubai gives you no taxes. So it's not that. So the question is more, what counts as taxable income in India? And there are countries, the US, for example, which are much more tough about that. They don't, you can't just say that I'm leaving, bye-bye, and I won't pay taxes. And, and Sweden has an exit tax you have to pay to leave. So there are countries that can do much more. But it's a matter of, you can't tell people that you can't move to Dubai. So therefore, you have to think of when you say ban, what does it mean? So if there was a world agreement that says that, if Dubai does it, we'll stop all trade with Dubai, then indeed you would have the problem would be, or if St. Lucia has to grow all its crops because we're not going to give them any food, then it would, Iran has a trade. After all, the trade, using trade to coerce countries is not unknown. So we could do it. We could say that, Granada gets no more rice. And then they will presumably have to collaborate a bit more.
But why it should happen? Because countries like probably, let's say, Monaco or the UAE, they survive on the fact that they're building such a good, safe, secure country, and which is probably tax efficient for highly ultra-net, high-worth individuals, whatever you want to call them. They attract. That is how they attract, or else they're just going to be deserts and barren lands.
But why? But the amount of damage they do to countries which have many, many, many more people. It's a matter of people, right? So eventually we want to help a lot, people, large populations, and these countries do huge damage to.
But it's always going to be like a debate of how do you do citizens of these countries matter more because that's how they make money versus some other country where there are more people?
But I think the debate is more about. It's true that there will be a debate, but it's when my economic model is that I'm going to exploit some other country, then you could say that country has a right to push back. So Europe is basically, I think, this minimum tax on corporates which will happen. So all companies will have to pay if they want to sell in Europe. They can't just locate in St. Lucia and so, Europe, after all, is providing their market. Why should Europe subsidize their lifestyle? Europe should do exactly that, which is they should impose a high minimum tax on any income that comes from selling in Europe or ban selling in Europe. I think that will happen. Actually,
that happens in India as well, right? Even if you're in some other country and you're selling it here,
no, and we don't have
place of business. You have to pay at least not personal tax, but you have to pay the GST and stuff like that.
We don't pay. We don't have any tax on Meta, on Alphabet. I mean, are they paying any taxes on anything? No.
But they must be paying GST just to operate here.
Oh, no,
They're not paying corporate tax.
no, but they're not.
And their Indian entities must be paying, no?
Because they're not selling anything here. They're selling advertising online. So I don't think they are. I mean,
I'm asking, I don't
I'm
know.
not an expert on
Me neither, I'm just
Indian
asking.
tax law. Okay, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I doubt that they're paying much in taxes here.
Interesting.
I doubt they pay very much because, in fact, Europe is fighting this battle against Trump to get to tax the Alphabet and Meta and I guess Microsoft or whatever these companies. Europe is fighting, and the Trump basically forced them to not tax them. So I don't think actually we would dare.
Meta paid 5,993 crore in income tax in 2026 to the Indian government.
Yeah, but is that because they are, as a fraction of their revenue? Let's do it as a fraction of their revenue coming from India. That's the part I don't know.
Yeah. So the point is that they pay some tax.
Yeah.
Based on, I think there is some rule that all the services which are being availed here, you will have to pay taxes here on that. You probably don't have to pay personal income tax because probably Mark would be making, that's a personal citizenship. But I think company, the place of business,
The
the place of
profit
services would
tax,
be.
we don't get the profit tax. I do think that
The top co must not be paying, but the Indian co must be paying.
yeah, the Indian co is probably paying. I'm saying the Europeans are fighting this battle as we speak. So I don't know exactly tax. I'm not, tax law is now 2 steps away from me, but I can tell you that the Europeans are fighting this battle, and Trump is very much, I mean, that's why they are so pro-Trump. You could imagine a law which says that every country, every market gets the same share of, if you were operating in a market, after all, we provide them with a huge market.
Yeah. We're the consumption market.
Yeah. Why do we provide them free? So the question is what's the scale of it? So I think that's one question. And then the question of personal income and paying taxes on it is a distinct question. Yeah. So that, I do think that those are separate.
That's, it's interesting to me because yesterday I was having a conversation with Samir Saran. He said the same thing, that we give such a big, large, humongous consumption market and a potential market which is growing and getting richer, and we don't price it right, and we are just giving it away for free.
Yeah.
He said the same thing. You are saying the same thing. Almost every thought leader is moving in this direction.
But I think Europe is fighting this battle right now. So it's the signals are there, which is that Europe is trying to get these large American global service providers to be taxed based on the revenue that they are getting from European countries.
China, how do they do it?
China doesn't allow these people in. So very simple.
Apple is there, right? Actually,
Apple is there, but Apple is a company also in China. They're producing, so but
different things. So different.
They don't allow WhatsApp or Google. So they don't have the same problem that we do.
They're closed economy.
Yeah.
Do you think for economy to grow, keeping it close makes sense? Just like what China did.
I think China never kept it closed. I mean, when it started growing, China was always, what they did was they undervalued their exchange rate. So that's a little bit like closing, because Chinese things were cheap and foreign things were expensive. But they were never closed. They were always open, because they realized that at this point, we need chips. If we want to do, if we want to be competitive in AI, we need chips. And if we don't get the chips, we'll just zero chance. If we do, and NVIDIA is not, we need to, it's an American company. We'll have to pay that. So I do think that there is no alternative to especially in today's world, to using the world market for the key input. So I don't think we can afford to be closed. And I think we did very badly when we were fully or almost fully closed, we were, everything was such a pain to get that people weren't using the right inputs, and everything was a little bit of a jugaad and all that. So,
You're talking before 91.
Before 91. So I think we've been there, done that. I do think that, do we have to be, is perfectly open or partly open? These are harder questions. But, the Chinese certainly were not fully open. They always kept their exchange rate undervalued, which then is a way to basically close it partly.
Talking about China, that gets me to our economy again. We are in this race where we're going to be competing against China and US at some point in a couple of decades or years from now. And we are at this point chasing Japan, right? So it's like our GDP is almost going to be around that. Yet an average Indian is probably 10 or 11 times poorer than an average Japanese. Does it mean that we are growing as an Indian and we have arrived? Or does it just mean that it's some number which is good for books and pride and it actually means nothing?
I mean, the GDP comparison, I already said this, means very little to me. There is some significance. Of course, we have more sway in the world than, Guyana, because we have more of we're a bigger market. If we banned, like China has, Alphabet, it would be costly for Alphabet in a way that's not, if Guyana bans Alphabet, it's not going to be. So, but I think the size matters. But first order is very little to do with what we should really take pride in, which is quality of life for our people.
And quality of life, is it improving?
It has improved in some ways, but I think especially if you look at the amenities we provide the poor, there I really think, if you go to the kind of not the central part of Delhi, but like Rohini or Dwarka or places like that, I know Mumbai less, but it is such completely desolate places. The urbanization is so low quality. There are no parks. There's dusty. Children get to play in the dust rather than in some place which is healthy. The quality of the air is terrible in Delhi. It's so terrible that some estimates are that, people are losing 10 years of their life. These kinds of numbers should really, that's quality of life, right? It's just how long do you live? If you're sick from the age of 55 because your lungs get weak, then that's low quality of life. And I think a lot of people, except those who can afford to get out of Delhi and go to their house in Goa in the winter, or those who can have, air purifiers in every room and good ones. I think for the rest, it's a bit of a... To talk about quality of life, that's the trade-off. Delhi used to have much better air. Now the poor are richer in Delhi, but the air they breathe is terrible.
Yeah. So you said poor are richer in Delhi.
Yeah, that they, compared to 1990.
Okay.
The poor in Delhi are much better paid. Even inflation adjusted, but does that mean that their quality of life is higher?
You wrote another paper, Marry for what?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
What determines marriage is a huge economic choice. You can, and it's always been. There was in the Middle Ages. There was in Europe. There were a lot of people died very young, and a lot of widows who older, meaning they were 28, would marry 18-year-old boys because they wanted a strong boy to work on their farm, which their husband they had been widowed, and so it was always an economic choice. They were buying labor. So and now in India, we, in a sense, we do the reverse. We buy labor. I mean, women, very cheap labor who, she's works like 12 hours, khana banana, taking care of the elderly, this, that, school, get the children to school, come back, cook for their, they have very long days. So in a sense, there's always that element of, so is marriage an economic choice? Of course. And the question we were asking was, how much of it is, how important is caste in these decisions? And we found that it was despite being an economic choice, caste is very important.
How? What did you find?
We found that the premium on getting a groom and this is not necessarily the choice of the woman, but of the family, a premium on groom who is from the same caste is like the difference between a high school degree and an MA. That's a big difference. So people were willing to sacrifice a lot of education for caste matching.
And you've seen that different castes have different wealth structures. How? Like, is even in 2026 there are some caste who ends up getting wealthier than others?
Yeah, but I mean, we discussed this. I mean, in the end, it's not that social connections matter, family, kind of background you come in, the fact that you have an uncle who can give you a loan of 10 crores to start your business matters. So why wouldn't it be? And your uncle is from your same caste. There's nothing surprising about that.
Do you think in future, now that the AI is coming, the inequality will be more or less?
I think that what's going to happen is that especially the middle class will be hollowed out.
But then will the UBI come?
I think we are a little bit, moving towards covering more people in, the fact that, the PDS covers 75% now is not accidental. We are moving towards including a lot of the middle classes into these schemes. Whether UBI will come anytime soon, no, because I think we are still, our tax capacity is still extremely, we as we were discussing, if we start to try to tax the rich, they will move to Dubai and put their money in Maldives. And so I'm skeptical that we're going to get there anytime soon.
But OpenAI recently published a paper, and they're working on it very openly.
Yeah.
That at some point, because AI is going to do most of the jobs, then we will have to launch universal basic income.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the future?
I think the part that OpenAI is not open about is how will we fund it and who's going to pay the taxes. And I really think that it's very easy to say that productivity will be high, so we don't need workers and we can give them UBI. All sounds good, but then you ask them, okay, then shall we have a 70% tax rate on the rich? Because that's how we'll fund it. How will we fund it otherwise? I don't understand this. This conversation is a bit dishonest in my view. We really need to talk about paying much higher tax rates than we are facing now. And then I'm very keen to join that conversation. Because I have thought about it, but I just don't see the fiscal side of it needs to be honestly dealt with before we can talk about UBI.
So it's like the rich who are making consolidated wealth should be taxed way more.
Way more. That's the only way if you want to get into the UBI conversation, there is no.
Are you in favor of that though?
Yes, I'm in favor
In
of
the UBI concept?
whether it's UBI. That's a more difficult question. The question of, I said, of taxing the rich more. Yes. Whether right now we need UBI or we need to have more targeted. If in India we went to do that, we're still pretty poor. We may want to do more targeted investments than that. There's a lot of other things we need. We need urban infrastructure. We need to deal with the pollution in our cities. There are many things that are valuable. Whether I would say UBI is the number one on that list, we need to improve our education institutions. There are many things we need to do. That's a much harder question on whether we should go directly to UBI or we should invest it in other things. Should we tax the rich more? Yes.
There was one thing which came in my research, which was about, you were in Bihar for 10 days, and even in jail there was inequality.
Yeah.
What inequality was there? They're like jailers of certain studies. Just give me that example.
1893, I think, or something. Indian penal code used to, which were now we have replaced, but it was was what we were jailed under. There was a provision which said that people with bachelor degrees can get bhindi or vegetables. The others get, they get different diets. So we were going to get, if we could prove that we had all bachelor degrees, we could get, vegetables without dal. Otherwise, you just get dal roti. That was literally the law, which is that if it's an amazing, you're jailed, but you will get better bhindis if you are graduate. Why? This is in 1893. They have other values. I mean, it's hard to, those caste was much more accepted. There's all kinds of things were different. It's hard to go back to that point and ask so much why.
Did you learn anything specific in those 10 days when you were in jail, which nothing else in your life can teach you?
We were very privileged because a lot of friends were with us. I think being alone, I would have gone nuts. I think with all I was there with really many of my very close friends who are very close friends now.
Even today.
Yeah.
Last questions I have. You said GDP is quite not a metric that we should be looking at. It's not like a number we should, that's like somewhere like you don't take GDP very seriously.
I don't take it very seriously because I know a little bit about what goes into that sausage. And a lot of it is, for example, the informal sector, which you might notice is big in India. The informal sector is actually not measured on a yearly basis, okay? It can't be done. So what they do is they kind of use a coefficient. They estimate it from some model which they build every 5 years, I think. We're using some NSS data to connect, if this is how much spending is happening in the formal sector, this is how much spending is happening in the informal sector. Now, the fact that the informal sector is shrinking now because of GST and all that, and the formal sector has grown, all of this, how do you take into account? It becomes so when you talk about the growth rate is actually not 8.7, but 8.6 or 6.8 or, these second digits after the decimal. I don't have much faith in those numbers. I mean, I know how they're manufactured a little bit. And so, yes, I sort of, India's got richer. I don't think there is anyone who's disputing that. How much richer exactly, and, how good is our measure? And
but what should we measure? What number should we look at, if not GDP?
I think we do need to look at GDP. It just question is, should we invest more in measuring it? Or are we doing, and if we don't invest more, then should we put so much faith in that number? That's more the question. I'm not saying we should give up on it because I don't think it's still the globally accepted measure of the size of an economy. I'm not going to be the one who says that, give it up. But it's certainly the case that we put too much on this year 6.8%, last year 6.7%, बढ़ गया. It's so kind of it's a squishy thing. So you don't want to spend too much emotional energy on that kind of comparison. You can say that we are doing okay as an economy. We can see that the GST collection this year was the record, and so this quarter was a record, and that's a measure of transactions. So that's in some ways as good a measure as GDP. It sort of gives you a sense of scale that things are improving. The GST is higher now. Of course, GST what gets covered by GST varies, and the rates vary. So you have to still bury yourself into those numbers to see exactly what that implies. But it's not. I don't think any statistics is telling us that the economy is not growing. It's just how fast, etc. Then there is, people have different views. So I think we could do better on many things. Not one number tells you the full story. So there's no point in trying to think of the Holy Grail doesn't exist.
Fair. Well, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for spending time with us and explaining the concept basics of things.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed talking to you.
It was very fun. Thank you.
What was that story of जब आपको फोन आया था कमेटी से, नोबेल कमेटी से, तब 2 घंटे पहले आता है? व्हाट इज दैट स्टोरी? एंड देन यू वर फीलिंग स्लीपी? क्या था?
सुबह 4 बजे आते हैं.
हाँ, ओके.
तो 4 बजे कौन उठता है? तो मैंने सो गया. फिर I knew that people might call, so I switched off the phone and went to sleep. I told my wife कि आज काफी लंबी दिन जाएगी, क्योंकि बहुत सारे सेलिब्रेशंस होगा, तो अगर मैं अभी नहीं सो लेते तो शाम को थक जाएंगे. सो गए.
Really? नींद आ गई
पूरा.
थैंक यू सो मच ये एपिसोड एंड तक देखने के लिए. अब आपको पता है आपको 3 चीजें करनी है. सबसे पहले इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर लो, ताकि इसी तरह हम और भी वैल्यूएबल गेस्ट लाते रहें. नंबर 2, मुझे कमेंट्स में बताओ कि इस एपिसोड में आपको क्या अच्छा लगा, और कौन से ऐसे गेस्ट हैं जो आप देखना चाहते हो हम इस एपिसोड में, इस पॉडकास्ट में लेके आए. एंड ये एपिसोड किसी एक इंसान के साथ ज़रूर शेयर करना जिसको अपनी लाइफ में इससे कुछ बेटर चेंज करने का मौका मिलेगा, क्योंकि एक कॉन्वर्जेशन कैन चेंज समवन्स लाइफ. आई विल सी यू नेक्स्ट टाइम. अंटिल देन कीप फिगरिंग आउट.